God. Tell me about it. I'm feeling that, right now I'm on like 3 hours of sleep averaging in a day for the past 2 weeks.
And I'm writing a TV series, so it's the time is never enough.
Hi, Asim.
So then I'm not the only one who's late.
That's my life. I teach at 3 a.m. and then I go to bed at like 6 a.m. when everyone is going to waking up in Calcutta.
Hello, everyone. Good evening from India. There are people joining from different parts of the world. In fact, we have two people joining from Montreal, so good morning to them. My name is Asim Chhabra. I am a festival programmer, freelance journalist. I'm working with the iView World Human Rights Film Festival as a programming consultant. So welcome. The iView Film Festival runs from December 10th to 20th. There are a range of films for you to watch, international films, world premieres, and then some range of Indian films, shorts. And then there are some very, very engaging dialogues and conversations around the themes of the films. And this is going to be one of them, Queer Visions. I'll first of all introduce you to Maina Mukherjee. Maina is the festival director of the iView Film Festival. She's also the founder of Engendered, the arts organization, which she's founded in New York, and now it's partly in Delhi and partly in New York. It's an arts organization, human rights, looks at arts through the lens of gender, sexuality, race, and a number of other very vital issues, caste, religion, for instance, in India. And Maina's been a pioneer in that sort of space as a South Asian, as an Indian. So, Maina, welcome. I'll go now according to how people's are placed right in this frame of mind. Tathagata Ghosh is the next person. Tathagata has made a film called Miss Man.
এই শাড়িটা তোমার মায়ের খুব প্রিয় ছিল বাবা আমি তোমার বাবা তোমাকে কোনোদিন মেনে নেবে না
Are you joining us from Calcutta? Where are you joining us from?
I am. I'm joining from Calcutta right now. Thank you so much, Asim, for having me. Thank you, Maina, and everyone present.
Yeah.
It's an honor for me to be here.
Look forward to watching your film. I've heard wonderful things about the film. Next to Tathagata is a filmmaker joining us from Montreal, Eisha Marjara. Eisha, you want to join us?
Hello.
Eisha's made a fascinating, entertaining, provocative, very moving feature film called Venus.
Hey, kid! I've seen you following me around for the past couple of days.
You're Sid Gill?
Yeah?
You're my dad.
It's here again.
Which, among other things, stars a close friend of mine and mine, Debalina, who's a terrific New York-based actor. So Eisha, we're so glad that we can share this film with the audience in India also. So thank you very much. Who is Grey Matters? Is that Debanuj?
That's me.
Hi, Debanuj. Oh,
that's Arshad.
Good heavens. No, it's Arshad, our dear friend Arshad Khan, also joining from Montreal. Arshad is still going on in Montreal right now called MISAF, while his absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful film Abu is showing at our festival, and we are really honored to program it. Abu's, really, that film really touched me so much, and mine, I was very moved by it also. I know that. So, Arshad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Migration is the hardest thing in the world. That and coming out. I spent a long time struggling for my father's approval. How did my once joyous and cosmopolitan father go from this guy to this guy?
Next to Arshad is Onir. Onir is, Onir, do you want to come on in? Onir doesn't need any introduction. He's a very, very young man, but he's the godfather of sort of queer conversations in cinemas in India. Can I call you that? Can I call you the godfather of queer cinema in India? I mean, Onir made a called My Brother Nikhil. It is a very, very special film out of India at a point when those conversations just not happening on HIV, AIDS, and remarkable. And there's across the board, Onir has been doing consistently wonderful work and as a mentor to many young filmmakers. So Onir, welcome.
Thank you so much, Asim, and good to see you, Arshad. Hi.
Next to Onir is a young filmmaker, Tushar Tyagi, who is joining us from Noida, where I am also situated right now. Tushar made a lovely short film called Sevi Chintu, which has really taken the world of film festivals by a storm. It's played at many, many film festivals, and I think it's in the Oscar long list of short films, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, it has qualified for Oscars. And hi, Asim, and thank you, Maina, and everyone for inviting me here. It's an honor.
So I'm so happy that we're sharing Saving Chintu. It's a film that I've known for a while. Just
you know about the boy?
Yes,
we know about the boy.
You'll fight.
Your papers. Brave.
It's been 2 years.
Some of Arshad's film Abu also I've known for a very long time. Next to Tushar is Debanuj, who's a dear friend from New York days. Although Debanuj, are you in Connecticut now or you're in California?
I am in California, but right now I am in Kolkata. I'm temporarily here till March, working from Kolkata.
I see. But you're teaching in California, right?
I teach for University of California in Santa Barbara, correct.
Oh, Santa Barbara. Wow, what a beautiful location. So welcome. And you, of course, know Maina and Engendered very well for a very long time. And next to that Jitin Hingarani, that just is the image there. Sebastiano Riso. Sebastiano Riso is from Italy. And he had a film called Darker Than Midnight, which I have not seen. And I'm very, very keen to see it. So, Sebastiano, welcome.
And what it was for is what it needed before my grief waited in peace. My beating, my sweetest, my waiting.
We're very happy to have you. We're in Italy?
Yes, perfect. Hello, hi to everyone.
Where in Italy are you, Sebastiano?
I'm in Rome.
You're in Rome, okay. So yeah. I see it's already gotten dark, so I guess it's evening. So I think you're 4.5 hours behind. Yeah. So welcome. It's a great panel with some wonderful short films and some very interesting, amazing thinkers here. So Maina, over to you.
So thank you everyone for lending your time to this. What an amazing range of voices we have over here. All of you have come from, very different sort of film backgrounds, I feel. The stories that you're telling are also really diverse. I have seen most of the films except for Eisha's film. And I'd like to, just kind of explain why this panel is taking place. This is really meant to be a roundtable, and we had a couple of other, directors who were going to join us, but unfortunately, for technical reasons, could not. But because of the varied kind of backgrounds that you guys have come from, and also from different geographical locations, it's quite amazing to have everyone on the same table, around the same table. So this is meant more as a round table. I'll definitely be asking some questions, but please feel free to also talk to each other. The idea is to be really conversational and hear about experiences and anecdotes from all of you and your understanding of queer cinema. Sebastiano, I'm gonna start with you actually, because your film is one of the oldest over here. I mean, it was in 2014, right? Darker Than Midnight was 2014, and it went to Cannes and did really well there, and was very critically acclaimed. The panel has this twofold idea. I mean, what we're trying to understand is that, beyond discourse, the question of what makes a film queer has been subsumed by sort of aesthetics and narratives that display like a straight gaze, So I wanted to understand from you why Italy has had this long history of films, and how have you been influenced by it? When you're telling a queer story in Italy as your first film, what was at the back of your mind? Why was this story important for you to say?
Well, the story is a coming of age of 14 years old transgender born in my city, in Sicily. And it was very important for me to talk about this kind of minority, because to be a transgender in Italy is still a problem. Because in a way, if you are a gay man, or if you don't look as a as a gay person, your life could be in theory easier. But if you are a transgender, it is even worse, and it is even more dangerous. So my Darker Than Midnight was my first feature film. And when I realized that was the right movie for me, and I proposed it to my producer, I was pretty shocked, because my producer asked me to be careful with the crew, to don't say about my homosexuality. And was very crazy for me. I mean, like, for him it was okay, but he recommended me to don't say that, because still now in Italy, you don't say that, but still now, to be gay is a problem, and to be a transgender, as I said before, is maybe is worse. So when we realized the movie was 2013 and was released in we shot it in 2013 and was released in Cannes 2014. And I was really surprised, because I traveled for 1 year everywhere around the world with this movie, because is in that sense is in every country, more or less in different ways, there is a kind of homophobia or transphobia. And I think in that sense, cinema could help people to create empathy. And as you said before, it's right. In Italy, we have an old tradition in queer movie. Also, if I don't like to talk about queer movie, I like to talk about cinema, great cinema, when it give you the chance to create empathy. But I know for sure what do you mean. And in a sense, Pasolini, for example, when he shoot Salo, it was something very scandalistic. It was considered too much. But I think above all here in my country, in Italy, but in general in Europe, we need to talk more than before about the LGBTQE community.
Yes, and you know, Italy's also had "Call Me by Your Name" in recent years, and that has really pushed queer cinema into the mainstream. But it's also been critiqued for that reason, and you know, it's almost sort of it's a beautiful, beautiful film. But a lot of people have critiqued "Call Me by Your Name" because it's, I mean, with this whole idea that it's almost like a straight gaze into it. Your film, on the other hand, does underline sort of a lot of the difference rather than the sameness. And there is, so there is this distinct difference between a film like yours and something like Call Me by Your Name. But do you kind of feel that that the film that you have made, or some of the voices or the cinema that has happened in the past, has given space to a newer kind of you know, queer cinema in Italy now, or in the West now? I mean, do you feel like that has had?
Well, in a way, yes. In a way, yes. But it's hard to say. It's very hard to answer to your question, because I don't want to say something not clear or just my idea. But for example, it's true, because with Call Me by Your Name, the audience was completely divided in two. No, because we have the big response from the international viewers, and they really support it, and the Oscar and so on and so on. But at the same time, it was very curious for me to see how for the Italians was an unrealistic movie. It was very common to hear here in Italy. I wasn't so realistic, and you know, is a specific word. What means to be realistic in a country where we have the new realism? No, so it was very curious for me, and this thing let me think about that the people need to find a way to sometimes to refuse the movie.
Right, right. I'm going to jump from that to Onir, actually, because this question definitely applies to Onir. I think if Onir had not made My Brother Nikhil, what would have been the history of queer cinema in South Asia? That's something that I've always thought about, because it was a film that was surprisingly a voice from the margins, but it was suddenly mainstream, and it was like the kind of mainstream acceptance it had to it was really, really lent itself to the space in coming years for a wide range of cinema. I mean, today I'm sitting here with so many South Asian filmmakers. You know, even at the festival, we have this wide range of people. And I always wonder where that tipping point comes, you know, when you're not shouldering the weight of or the responsibility of representation as being the only one. So you come from a long, Sebastian, you come from a history. There's been an entire repository of queer cinema, or cinema that could be considered queer, in Italy. But with Onir, I'd like to jump to him now and have some reflection on, you know, the then and now, Onir, about, you know, what it was like then when you made My Brother Nikhil, and what it is like today.
Thank you, Maina, for being so kind with your words. Actually, it was really interesting to listen to Sebastian talking about how in 2011, sorry, I might have I mixed up the dates, when he made his film, that in Italy he was asked to hide his identity. But somehow, in 2004, when I was shooting My Brother Nikhil, in India, it was criminalized by law. And I've been recently writing a book about my journey, and I was remembering that one of the things that was empowering for me was to be open with the entire cast and crew about my sexuality even then. And there was always this apprehension, because in India, you know, unlike, I mean, we have a clear class divide in South Asia. between like suppose the department heads and the light boys and all that come from totally different background. And I remember midway while we were shooting, one of the light boys told the cameraman, because the cameraman came and told me, he said that, oh, this is a different kind of love, but I think it's okay. And for me, that was so assuring that while making the film, during the process, there were people transforming. I remember even like when in Delhi I was shooting for Shab in 2015, I was little apprehensive that with this crew there, to be shooting, there were lots of men kissing in the film. But I realized that when you as a director are not giving it too much of, not really focusing so much that, oh my God, now we are shooting this kiss and how it's going to happen. Suddenly the crew itself seemed to adapt that this is something natural. It's happening, and we just are quickly finishing the scene and moving on to the next one without any discussion about how amazing the kiss was, or even like, during publicity, we never talk about, okay, there was this in India, which a lot of other people do, you know. But having said that, I think, which we were talking earlier about now platforms coming in and some people talking about how it's easier. But I feel that in 2004, when I made my brother Nikhil independently, it was somewhat easier to go about distributing it because the largest distributor in India, Yashraj Films, came on board without having me to change one single cut in the film. And they are at that point the largest distributors, and gave me the kind of mainstream release which is extremely difficult right now, with the platforms, with different corporate production houses, because suddenly, the whole approach to cinema is different. That personal touch is gone. And another aspect which I very, very deeply feel today, and it's so lovely to see Tushar, Tathagata, Debanuj, young filmmakers in India making films right now, because I feel it's so, so important to have the queer gauge. Because constantly what irritates me is when I see these films which are made, because now after the Supreme Court verdict, there is this whole thing that we have to make more, LGBTQI stories, but they are told by people who are, you know, from the heteronormative world or not out and proud, and it is always about what the straight world is comfortable listening to. So it's not, we need us telling our stories. I mean that is really, really important, too, because the way, just like the woman's gaze is important, you know, because it's different. Similarly, the queer gaze is different. We need to tell our stories.
Eisha, I'd like to ask you, what were your influences before? I mean, when you decided that you were going to make this film, what were your influences over the years? Why did you feel that this was the story that you wanted to tell? How was this different from anything? Because every filmmaker, when they tell a story, they want to say something different, right? I mean, it's a unique perspective. You imagine that you can tell the story better than anyone else. So what were your thoughts? Why did you want to, what drew you to the story?
Well, in a way, I think I would agree that you want to, as a filmmaker, you want to do something different, but somehow you always return to the themes that really kind of nag at you and that sort of kind of preoccupy you. And I feel like in a way with Venus, as much as I probably consciously wanted to do something new and explore new ideas, which I did, I think underneath, I think I'm also dwelling on some of the similar themes of identity and gender and finding home, coming of age, which is another way of probably framing Venus. Venus, just briefly, is about someone who comes out as trans as she approaches her 33rd birthday. She comes out as a trans woman, and then she discovers that she has a 14-year-old kid. And so she's the biological father of a 14-year-old boy who wants a relationship with her. And so it's about their relationship and her discovering her role as a parent as well as a woman. But just back to your question, I'd done a short film called House for Sale. And it was initially a story about the other woman. You know, I always loved the idea of the other woman, or the femme fatale, the vamp. I made a film in India that I shot called Desperately Seeking Helen. And it's about the Bollywood star Helen. And so I'd always been intrigued by that archetype of the woman who breaks all the rules. You know, the vamp. And so in House for Sale, it was about the other woman who meets the wife of her lover, and they form. And then I was speaking about, you know, thinking about the idea, and I thought, what if the other woman is a trans woman? And because I have a friend here who has spoken about her experience as trans, dating straight men who are in the closet. And so I proposed this idea. And so with Atif Siddiqui, who's an actor in Montreal, you know, I made that movie, and that sort of got me very interested in the experience of trans people who experience womanhood in a different way, because I think womanhood and femaleness and what femininity means is the theme that excites me and is interesting to me. And this is another way of exploring gender and femininity. And so that was a very exciting kind of theme to explore, even though in Venus, it's more about the relationship of the main character, Sid, with her son and with her parents, and trying to reignite her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. So she's sort of trying to navigate all of these relationships. And it's a funny film, you know, there's a lot of humor to it. I was really interested in something Onir said earlier, just about making something, naturalizing, or maybe I missed that. Anyway, yeah, I guess normal is a problematic word for me. But more naturalizing the experience of a trans person rather than othering her, because we do that anyway. And so I think my intention was to naturalize her so that people would break through this, oh, this is a film about a trans woman, it's trans, you know, rather than focusing on that, focusing that this is a woman, this is a human being, you know, who is trying to belong and find her way in the world, be accepted by her parents, which is an experience that everyone has and probably
can relate to.
Yeah, so and that was really important for me, to not highlight her transness, to introduce her as a trans woman, but then move on with her relationships, you know, her breakdown with the relationships with a boyfriend, you know, her parents, and explore all of these other themes.
Right, to fully embody her, because a person is never really just their sexuality or, you know, I mean, and there are multiple identities too that we all carry with us.
Yeah.
So definitely also, a more full-bodied. representation.
And also emphasize, you know, that she's a Canadian woman, she's a North American woman who's also South Asian and trans, and you know, she fits into all of these roles. So yeah, giving her, you know, fleshing her out, you know, giving her multiple dimensions.
Sure.
And I think also just that there have been so many really hard, difficult films about trans lives. This was a film that was supposed to be, you know, this is hopefully uplifting and more optimistic, I guess. There's a happy ending, you know. And I think a lot of trans people who watched the film really appreciated that.
Right. And also, I mean, even though you probably didn't want to make the first of something, but you did end up creating the first sort of trans character in the South Asian diaspora who on screen, because I haven't really seen characters like that. I mean, I've seen you know, trans folks represented in India, but not really. And some of those representations are incredibly skewed and very unidimensional. So it was really, it's nice to know that there is a different kind of representation of that. I'm going to ask Tathagata to kind of talk to us a little bit about your film, Tathagata, and why it's significantly different, why you feel it is different from some of the cinema that you have seen in South Asia around queerness. And that's such a broad word, you know, and I certainly don't mean to homogenize the sort of various strands that go into making this queer canon of work. But tell us how you would imagine it being different.
First of all, thank you, Maina, and thanks to everyone, all the filmmakers present here. It's really an honor for me to be here among this illustrious panel, or round table. So I'm really, really honored. And thanks to Jitin and everyone for having our film Miss Man at this beautiful festival, which is so important and so timely at a time like this in which we are living in. I think our film, first of all, I think my film started on a very personal level. Actually, it came from a very personal experience based on the life of a friend who was forcefully married off by his parents when he came out to them. And the marriage, of course, didn't work out. And this was a time when homosexuality was criminalized in our country. And it was very tough for him. And ever since then, I have been really wanting to share his story with the world because it really mattered to me. So I think cinema, for me, I make films when I'm affected by something very personally, when something disturbs me very personally. And that's when I start writing my scripts. Miss Man was, of course, came from a place like that. And that's how the journey of the film started, the writing process. And I have made the film myself, financed it myself as well with my own savings. I think what I made sure right from the time I was writing the film is that I have to cast the right actors. And since my film really deals with the discovery of identity, it talks about gender fluidity, I was very keen and very sure from the beginning that I will cast artists from the queer community in my city, in Calcutta. Because there is a plethora of talents, and I believe that really their voices need to be heard. Because when I'm telling their story, they need to tell their own stories, because they really do bring a lot to the plate, and that is something I feel I feel missing from many films, because they usually, like the casting is not right, and there are the gaze, the queer gaze is somehow wrongly represented in those films. So, and I think it did wonders in my film, because one of the two leads in my film like the central character, which is played by Orgho Adhikari, and the trans woman, the mentor character, the trans woman mentor character in my film has been played by Ratri Shah. And I think those are two pivotal characters in the film. And actually, you won't believe that Ratrish's character was initially not written in the film. It was just one brief scene. And Orgo connected me with Ratrish, and that's how her character was written. She inspired the film that much, and of course, same with Orgo. So the entire structure of the film, the way the film has been made, the montage sequences, or the way the film has been edited and put together, the structure, it emerged after my cast came on board. So I think that was a unique experience that I went through. Usually when I write my scripts, I do my storyboard, I stick to it. But this time when I sat with Orghov before we shot for almost, like 1 or 2 months, uh, I just talked to him more than any workshop or any rehearsal. I just had long conversations with him. And from those conversations, really, the structure of the film emerged. A lot of nuances were put in, and I think this is the result of having members from the queer community play those characters, because I feel the portrayal is authentic. And honestly, I didn't have to direct much Orgo on the set, because he was at times it felt like I was shooting a documentary, because the journey. Because the first thing that Orgo told me after reading the script was that this is me 5 years back. How did you know my story? And I think that was beautiful, because he immediately connected with the material, immediately connected with the character, and the journey of the film started. So and actually he inspired other members on the set as well in many ways. So it has been great. And we have shot in places. We have shot in North Kolkata, which is a very conservative place actually, on the ghats of Ganges in Ahiritola in North Kolkata. And we shot some of the most important scenes in the film between Orgho and Ratrish, where Ratrish is singing the Bengali folk song on the ghats. Those scenes were shot in places which are extremely conservative, which is frequented by people who really have no idea, and they mock people. Those places are really frequented by those kind of people. And when we are shooting it, it was wonderful to see. Actually, some of them were really passing some lame comments when I was filming Ratrish, and Ratrish just called them and really sensitized them. Actually, she said that did you understand what he was saying, and sort of gave them a brief lecture on where they were going wrong. So, and they admitted it, they accepted it, they understood it, and I think this is what our film has been doing as well. So I think the casting, the representation in cinema, I find it lacking in many films, which are made with probably right intention but goes wrong sometimes. So I think I tried to do that correctly with my film, and I have got really great response from wherever the film has been screened, and people have talked about the performances. And though none of them, Ratri, Shorgo, none of them ever acted before. This is the first time they have even faced a camera, or they have never even done stage performances as well. So it was wonderful to see them, to see the film develop. So I found myself in the process that gender can be fluid. So if somebody asks me tomorrow that what do you identify yourself as, before making Miss Man probably would have said that I'm straight, or I'm heterosexual. But now probably Orgo made me understand that gender can be fluid. If I fall in love with a man tomorrow, that's also fine, because it's ultimately I'm exploring myself. So it's really beautiful. The process is beautiful, and Miss Man has changed me a lot as a filmmaker as well as a person, most importantly. So this is what I have experienced with my film. Yeah.
Fascinating. So very process based, and community involvement, and different sort of really living. This is something that I've been hearing also with other filmmakers. We spoke to two regional filmmakers from the South, and they were talking about how they'd spent 2 years living with the community and kind of trying to really make sure that they were represented, and the representation was of a particular degree. That's interesting. I want to talk to, Tushar and Arshad. Both of your films are very much about the idea of home and nurture, or home as a place of frequently of hurt, and home also as a place of refuge, eventually. So Arshad, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your film and why you felt like you really needed to tell this story, and how you were in Canada. You've been a part of the diaspora for many years, and I'm sure you've been seeing a lot of queer cinema. Why you felt that it was important to add this to the sort of repository of queer cinema?
Thank you, Maina, for inviting me to be on this panel of giants. I really think these are very loving, amazing people. I'm so delighted to be in their company, each one of them that I know. And I've seen most of the films actually over here. And so I'm quite honored to be here. I only became a filmmaker after 9/11, as you know, after the attack on South Asian, brown, Muslim identity, and the association, the false association of terror with this identity. So I dropped out of my architecture school studies and picked up a camera and decided I was going to tell stories because there was nobody telling our stories. So I understand very well when it comes to representation, authentic voice, and telling your truth and speaking your truth. And I agree that we have pioneers like Onir, like Deepa Mehta, like Meera Nair, who have taken this road and very courageously been telling stories. I'm not trying to be a contrarian here. I really do believe in proper representation, but I also believe that actors are there to act. And it's kind of a dangerous road if we always want gay or trans people to play only gay and trans characters, and vice versa, if only straight people can play straight characters. This is a really, I think, a strange path that people are kind of going down of identity politics, and I don't quite understand it fully. I am interested in exploring it. I think as much as you can, you should be authentic to what your character is or what you're writing. And I think that happens in the casting process, but filmmaking is hell. So when people make judgments on your work or say, oh, why didn't you do this properly or that properly, or didn't use this authenticity or that, frankly, it makes me really pissed off because just to tell stories is hard enough, and then to meet everybody's expectations. And sometimes the loudest people are quite a minority, and you just don't know who to please and who not to please. And I loved Call Me by Your Name. I love Venus. I love all these films. I love Miss Man, but I don't think that anyone has a right to say that someone can't tell some story. This is storytelling. Filmmaking is an art and a science. It's a very difficult profession. Everyone is doing their best, just like everyone's doing their best to survive in this COVID-stricken world. I haven't seen Isha's beautiful face in more than a year, for example, and she lives in my own city. So I think that just like that, for making my film, if you come back to my film, I had to realize that I have to make my own chosen family, people who understand, appreciate, love me. And I had to distance myself from my blood relatives and tell this brutally honest story. And I was trying to just be sincere and tell a story because this story was not told. And these are unrepresented stories and they need to be told. And I needed to tell them. So it was sitting in me, it had to come out. I was working on actually a feature film about a Pakistani girl with magical powers kicking ass in suburban Canada. But making those is making
That's
films
a pretty
is
queer
very hard.
film too.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll bring my gaze as a LGBTQIA identified person to my work and to what I do and whatnot, but I am not going to put other people down or say that their work isn't authentic enough or good enough because so and so such and such reason. I believe in culture of celebration, non-censorship. We have a film called Zindagi Tamasha, which is the closing film at MISAF and also at iView. It's a great film, but a lot of people try to censor it. So are we going to allow people to censor things because they don't agree with them or are upset about something? I don't know. I mean, this is an ongoing conversation, but I do believe The most important thing is to respect the filmmaker, to respect the artist, because when you respect, you get respect. And tomorrow, the shoe could be on the other foot.
Interesting. I'm going to come back to all of you in a bit. Tushar, we want to hear from you because we haven't so far. Why this story? Like, how did you set off wanting to make a queer film? Why the story?
So actually, like film had its own kind of a journey, and it was really an evolution of a script. Like I was suffering from severe anxiety without even knowing that I was back in LA, and I had seen a lot of doctors. And I actually have a condition called scoliosis. So I ended up with this one of the finest spine surgeon, and I was like kind of convincing him to just operate my back, and it's just they had to like put rods in it to kind of just make it straighter because I have like S-shaped spine. And he was like, no, you don't need that because your condition is not so severe, blah blah blah. Cut short, he was like, okay, come to dinner with me and my wife, and I'll make sure that you understand why you don't need surgery. We went to dinner, and there was one of the counselors and blah blah blah. So I came to know that apart from that, I came to know that I have severe anxiety. His wife started, we were sitting on the table, and she was like, can I watch some of your trailers? I sent him on phone. She liked it, and she was like, she just bent over, and she was like, why don't you tell him your story? He's a filmmaker, he could do something out of it. And I that night came to know that he was adopted from India illegally, and I had to convince him like over 2 months period of time that I want to make his story. I want to make a film on his story. And he acknowledges that his parents did something illegal, but he also acknowledges that they did, because all the life that he has is because of his parents and their courage of taking that step. But one problem was I was sitting with the script like for over 2 years. The thing was that his parents were straight, and so many times we've seen straight foreign couple comes to India, rescue a kid, and goes back. And Lion was one of the films that I watched when I was working on the script. Cut short, when I came to India in 2018, I went to this ashram, and there I met this guy called Jeremy. And this guy is from Manhattan. He's like tough New Yorker, and he's been living in India since 2001. And he told me that he runs a shelter. So I became very interested that this guy is from like Manhattan. He lives in Nagpur, India, which is not even a very big city. And so I asked him what kind of shelter. So he runs a shelter for, at the time, 20 HIV positive kids. Their parents, like most of their parents, died of AIDS. And he told me that when he came to India, he was back in 2000, I think it was 2002, he had just diagnosed with HIV, and he wanted to take this eat, pray, and love sort of a journey. And he came to India and came to know that, in India, nobody cares about people with HIV, let alone people from LGBTQ community, and they face discrimination. So he opened this shelter in middle of Nagpur, and he was being chased by local goons. Like they were like, he's breeding and feeding virus. He was like, I didn't move. He was being pressurized to move his, shelter from where it was to somewhere out of the city. And he's like, his words were, he was like, I'm New York tough. I didn't bow down until they beat one of his shelter's kid to almost the death and put him in the dumpster right outside his building. And he was like, that was the day that I decided I'm going to move. And he told me like so many horrifying stories. And while doing my research, I interviewed a lot of people who have adopted kids from India. And I actually came across a lot of, wardens who used to run independent orphanage before Kara, which is like now Central Adoption Resource Agency. And one of them told me they had a couple of applications, and like gay people had sent out application, but they don't even entertain those applications. And I asked him why. And the answer was like, it just stunned me. He said that, do you think that gay people can be good parents? And that kind of shook me to to my core. As like, being straight, does it gives you a guarantee that the prospective parent is going to be a good parent? And I was like, I need to tell the story. I need to somehow, just, I understand the concept of pride. I understand the concept of the rainbow and standing out there. But I also at the same time think that until queer people will not stop making vendetta of the thing that they are different, nobody else will stop treating them differently. So I kind of wanted to, just take the conversation from, the starting point or wherever it is on the time frame right now, and put it in the middle and start like it's normal. Let's just start from there. I mean, yeah. I'd seen a lot of films with exploring sexuality, sexual abuse, drug abuse. I really had seen a film where a gay couple or lesbian couple, they don't even kiss in the film, but they are this intact. And I wanted to show that on a deeper level, that it's just not about physical attraction, physical love. It's about emotion as well. I mean, gay people are also 3D people, like as in like the 3 dimensions. They do have emotions. It's not about like just sex, party, and dancing around naked or whatever the stereotype is.
Interesting. Is that still a stereotype? Because I'm curious.
Yes, like lots of people. I did a lot of research, and yes, I mean it's people are not ready to see LGBTQ people as a regular parents. That's just something idea. It's way out of the box. It's not even it's just not even close to their mentality. It's just they're unaware of it.
It's interesting. A lot of filmmakers have concentrated a lot on sort of emphasizing the importance of normalization, and that's something that a lot of queer theorists have opposed in many ways, because there's a hegemony that is feared, in those kind of representations. And yet in South Asia, it's also really important when you're trying to break levels of prejudice. How do you create empathy for queer subjects? So Debanuj, I'd like to come to you and ask, as a professor of queer studies, how do you see queer cinema interact with queer theory? Because sometimes there's a big difference, right? Tell us a little bit.
First off, thank you, Maina, for having me. Can you hear my acoustics? Is my voice okay? Can you hear my voice? Is my voice registering? Since we've been talking about voice so much.
It's wavering a little bit, but we can hear you.
It's a very learning process for me. So I think when Maina asked me to be on this panel, I watched some of your work and I watched trailers of the new movies. I would love to watch everybody's work. But I want to kind of first quickly say what struck me as I heard all of you, and something that Sebastiano said earlier and Eisha rated is how gay and like, unless you come across, I mean, for Sebastiano, when he started us off by saying that there is still a lot of prejudice about talking about trans bodies, right? I mean, I feel like as long as we can avoid the gaze and come across as gender normative, there is some amount of, and there's other kinds of vulnerabilities, like Tushar talked about HIV, but I really think we should think more about, what does genderqueer, what does trans mean in different locations, right? I mean, in South Asia, often trans comes to represent as hijra or khwaja sira for Pakistan, or meti in Nepal. and we take some of these identities for granted, these cultural groups for granted, but they don't exist in the same way. There's so much diversity within the communities, and there is a lot of I think we need to really think about how being gender non-normative invites everyday gaze. That when you're cisgender, you might have a different layer of protection there, or sort of gender privilege to say that. So I'm excited to see the trailer, Eisha, and I would love to see your work, and also Miss Man and all of your works. But I think queer theory, as we got it in, I teach in the US, so let me position myself that that way. But the way we got queer theory in the US, we might as well call queer theory American studies, because it's very provincial. It emerges within a very specific location. So the history also of queer cinema and the interaction of queer theory is we get queer theory from queer art and activism. So you don't, it's a dynamic interplay, right? So I'm sure some of you are really bored because we write about you guys, academics, and then, we disagree between what you produced and what we wrote. But there is this, or maybe we agree sometimes, so there's this dynamic interplay between queer art, activism, and queer theory. So, I think B. Ruby Rich has written about this genre called New Queer Cinema, NQC, and NQC, New Queer Cinema, sort of emerges, in the sort of as a response to AIDS and the advent of the camcorder, right? So community people could access the camcorder, walk around in the 80s and try to archive what was happening, try to archive the outrage of the AIDS activism. And we see a lot of film around that time. We see in the US, films like Tongues Untied, Brother to Brother, Jeffrey. Now, Jeffrey is a very different case. It went from off-Broadway to a movie to actually like sort of a breakthrough movie in Hollywood, right? And this is AIDS cinema. This is kind of, and what Jeffrey does is it makes AIDS cinema into a mainstream cinema. We also get filmmakers like Cheryl Dunye, who made like a very path-breaking film about Black lesbians called Watermelon Woman, right? So I don't want to kind of, I wanted to say this because I am located in the US, and what we often call queer theory and queer cinema, sort of gets located in the what we get from US, Canada, and the UK. But I mean, it was very interesting listening to everybody. As I was listening to, I want to go back to this sort of genre of films around transgender. I was reminded of Fassbinder's 1978 film In a Year of 13 Moons, where the main character is a trans woman. I forget who actually played it, whether it was a trans person or not, I don't remember. And I think, in the US, we get Boys Don't Cry, in Bengali recently, we had Nagar Kirtan. So I think there's a genre of films that sort of historically and presently taking up this dynamic theme. But I think what is important is to, what Eisha said, is to break this genre of the sad transgender person, which is very similar to the suicidal gaze genre, right? So the murderous lesbian, the suicidal gay, sort of the volatile lesbian, these were kind of some of the genres that came up. I know, Mayna, you're smiling at that. But you could be volatile in other ways. You don't have to be the volatile lipstick lesbian. But
I like volatility.
Right. I think volatile and chaos is and so I'm very, and I think, Onir, I remember being at Asia Society when you had screened, when Breakthrough had screened My Brother Nikhil, and I was on stage with you guys. But when I was watching My Brother Nikhil, and I've written briefly about it, when I was watching My Brother Nikhil, what was happening is around me in Asian society, you don't necessarily get queer theory or queer activist crowd. You mainly had Asian society members. And I had there were very auntie looking women, who were in tears when Juichala was narrating. So I often think about this dynamic interplay between queer activism, art, and theory. I mean, I came to academia way after many years of doing queer activism. So I often tell my students, you're getting to study this because somebody protested, somebody held up a camcorder, somebody like made a film under a very small budget. But I mean, so I think I want to go back to all of you because found this I found this provocative question of representation very fascinating because I do think, I'm not a filmmaker, I can't go there, but I do think that there is a responsibility of the interlocutor as the storyteller. And I also am very curious because it's when you make film, because for and I think where we are in queer theory, as many of you know, that queer for us is not just, many of you are queer theorists, you're producing queer knowledge on your own right. So, and many curious about, because we talk about queer as the anti-normative in many ways. So for us, the 60-year-old unmarried Indian woman is a very queer figure, or even the 50-year-old, because they exist in a life that is outside the heteronormative economy, right? I mean, the HIV positive, be it gay or straight, or the child is a very queer figure because they cannot be sort of put into this imagination. And to be further provocative, the terrorist is a very big queer figure because they cannot be a normal nation state, right? So, I mean, there are all these range of how we think of what is queer. And I think queer cinema does more than representation. I think for me, what queer cinema does is it appeals to an audience. Like I remember watching Onir's film, but it also raises questions. And sometimes there is a lot of bad queer cinema, as many of you know. I mean, I think in the name of queer cinema, there is a lot of bad queer cinema, and I don't know what that is. For me, it's just, I think many of you broken the representation mind, brother-sister relations, like the parenthood piece, like the family piece, like the HIV positive child. These are very dynamic themes, and Tathagata, it's so exciting to hear about your film because many of the actors are my friends. So I can't believe I heard about it or watched it. So I'm very glad to be here and I would love to watch it.
Wow.
And then we are in
I'll
Kolkata, we
send
should
you a
have
link.
tea.
I'll send you that. Thank you.
You don't have to send
That's
it to
all I
him.
have
It's
to
playing
say.
on the festival. He can play it
Right.
That's right. I will do.
I'll convey your message to both of them.
Right. Is Sebastian still with us? Sebastian, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, of course. I'm
okay.
listening to
I realized that you are the only, actually we were going to have Albertina Carri join us as well from Argentina. And I heard that she's made this film called Daughters of Fire, which is a really interesting film and a beautiful film and very controversial as well, because it sort of talks about queerness and this in the understanding of art while weaving a story around two lesbian women. And it sort of also goes into representations of, non-coupledom and porn as art. So those are all sorts of newer dimensions that queer cinema is taking on, and obviously they are in different locations. For some people, another filmmaker who was supposed to join us today is Debalina Mao, and she's a filmmaker from Calcutta and has been making a lot of films about women's lives, queer women's lives. And honestly, the representation or the story or the narratives that are being told are very almost docu-fiction, because they're talking about realities. The idea is to talk about realities and how life for some people, queer lives are so marginalized still that it is literally a question of survival. And it is fascinating to me that, someone like Debalina's film, which is very much about a second or third tier city in interior Bengal, has resonance with, the protagonist of your film, Sebastian. Um, because it is also a matter of survival and it's with all of the strides that the West has made in terms of uh, progression of queer lives and more rights for everyone. It really was surprising for me to see your film, and at the same time I realized that there's a shared humanity across, eh, whether it's the East or the West, that there are still, we're talking about a certain kind of, like I said, marginalization, certain kind of at risk, life patterns that are emerging. And so, tell us a little bit about, where did you do your research for some of this work, and how do you think it reflects on society?
But personally, I grew up in the transgender community in Rome because when I moved from Sicily to Rome, I moved in a neighborhood where there was not now anymore, but there was a huge transgender community, and I was adopted by them. So for me, if my movies and all of my project comes from the real life. For example, I give you something more concrete. Now I start the casting of the next movie during the Second World War, during the Nazi occupation of Rome. And I know we saw a lot of movies about this, but this movie, not because it's mine, but because there is a different point of view about that period. And the period and the story comes from a box of letter from my grandma's nephew, and because he was confined in a little island during the Nazism. So I think for me the research and come from the something so close, so near to the reality is very, very important. But I tell you something more. Was very funny for me because there is a big international market of cinema in Rome during October, and I was invited to present to have a pitch, to make a pitch of this movie, and I was very surprised to see the proportion we have of co-production from the other countries, because I'm talking about all the European productions. So, but I was very surprised, and it happens because, as I said, there is a new point of view about this story, because it's like what I personally think. It's like as the people now need to see something more about this kind of stories in the detail. The story, as I said before, is about somebody in my family, but somebody in my family that he used to hide himself, to live in hiding, not in a geographic place, but in a women identity. So he comes from the variety. He comes from the variety of that time, and he hide himself to escape from the Nazis, the fascists, to using her femininity. So I think probably at the same times we have the good opportunity in this historical moment to tell this kind of story, because I think the big audience is waiting for something like that. I hope so.
Interesting. And also another thing that you said early on was, how you grew up with a group of transvestites and you felt like that was your home in some way. I want, the second part of this conversation is really also to look for similarity and resonance in some of the stories that I seem to see in all these different queer cinema. This idea of home, is home for queer characters or for queer protagonists, is the idea of home an origin point, or is the idea of home a destination? For example, I mean, even in Arshad's film, it's a circular moment in your film, Arshad. But at one point, you do say that you found your home outside of. You moved away. You had to move away from your home to find your family, your friends, and your intimate partners, and that became home for you because your natural home or your place of where you came from was also a place of much hurt and a place of much othering. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, essentially the story of Abu, but then you also move away from that and come back to a certain kind of reconciliation with your home. So I really love that about Abu, because I have seen and I have heard stories in queer cinema about the alienation or the hurt and finding other homes. But I really love that your film also goes back to that point of reconciliation and look with your with your family that you grew up with.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maina. Home, as I always say, it's an elusive place. What is a home? But if you look at in theory, home is a place where you find comfort and belonging. And so as human beings, we're always looking for that place, that elusive place where we find belonging. And I think all our films, all the filmmakers here and all the programmers here are there because they are building community. They are, some of them, using their voice, their cinematic voice, to speak out to those who will relate to them. And others are curating those voices and putting them together. For example, bringing a panel together like this, where people can get to know each other and others can see us, and there's power in that. And that's home. This is a building of a community. And this is where you feel safe and you feel like you can be yourself and you feel like you can help make the world a less miserable place. So, I think, this search for home has been examined in cinema historically, and this in all of our South Asian cinemas. The real point is the struggle is different in every place. I am very secure in my town of Montreal in Canada, but that security does not exist for my sisters and brothers in Pakistan at all. Many times, many places like Pakistan and many places in India and even in Europe. Like, I mean, you consider Sicily to be a pretty progressive place, but even there, so the idea of home and chosen family is something that I think queer people examine, and that's what I'm, talking about in my film as well.
Right. Lots of you talk about it. I mean, Tathagata's film also, centralizes this notion of home and the alienation that one feels in it, and how home is actually a dangerous place for a lot of queer people, because it's also so central to South Asians' imagination. I mean, I don't want to say South Asians, I would say that home is central to almost every person's imagination of their own self and identity. And so when that gets jeopardized, then you're talking about, your entire sense of identity sort of being jarred. And, you're constantly looking for a place that aligns those sensibilities back. Tathagata, tell us a little bit about that exploration of home, because your entire film narrative is surrounded around that.
Yeah, and I think it again, I think this is also very personal because I lost my father in 2015, and after finishing my graduation, I went to Vancouver, Canada, to study writing, screenplay writing, at the film school there. And right after 10 days, I went to Canada. I lost my father. He passed away because of a brain hemorrhage. And coming from middle class Bengali family, that was the first time I stepped out of my, stepped out of my hometown, let alone country. And the tragedy happened, and I was, of course, not prepared to it. And my father really believed in me when no one did. And I couldn't believe when the news came to me. I still remember it was really night time in Vancouver, and I suddenly got a call from my mother. And it was, I think, 10th of January in 2015. I got a call, and my mother said that it's bad news, and she was crying, and my uncle, she gave the call to my uncle, and he said that your father fell down in the washroom while taking a bath. It was a Sunday, and my mother and my father were supposed to go out to see a play that day, and he had fallen down and had a paralysis in the left side of the body entirely, and he was hospitalized. And it was I couldn't believe what I'm hearing, because my father actually had a surgery a couple of years back, open heart surgery, and he had a pacemaker in place as well. And I couldn't do anything. It's so claustrophobic, and it was so emotionally draining for me, because I wanted to come back home right then, but I didn't have the money to come back, and my father allocated money that you have to spend. You only have $500 to spend this month. Just get your rations, get your everything in place. You cannot spend more than $500, otherwise you won't be able to stay the entire year in Canada. And my program was for 1 year. It was very expensive. Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and he just put everything at stake to send me there. And then after a day, he called me, said that I'm doing fine. He was having tea. He called me from the hospital. And then after one day, again, I get a call. I woke up in the middle of the night, and then I heard that he had a brain hemorrhage, and probably he won't live. And I think I never thought that I will stand up on my feet, after that incident. It was, and again, I told my mother, do you want me to come back right now? Because I want to. Just tell me, and we have this much amount of left. And I gave the entire tuition fees to my film school. And my mother took an extremely bold decision, said that stay there, don't come back, finish your education, finish your film school, and then come back after a year. Because if you come back, I won't be able to send you back. And I said that that's completely fine. There's no question about that. But she said that it's impossible, because your father believed in you. He believed in your dream, and you have to live that. So I couldn't be back home for the final rites of my father as well. And I think that incident really left an extremely indelible mark on me, that how it is like to be away from home, and not having your closed ones around, and discovering yourself. And I think it left such a big impression on me. Probably it changed my life, actually. I think that 1 year, not only staying away from home, but going through a big personal tragedy like that. And after that, if people just say that, oh, this is at stake, I'm like, fine, because I think I have had the biggest loss of my life, the biggest loss that I can possibly hear. And except my mother, I have really no one. And 3 consecutive years, my 3 closest members of my family, my grandmother, my father, and my grandfather, passed away in 3 consecutive years. And they are the ones who really made me who I am, because for a long time, I stayed with my grandparents as well. I grew up with them, and I lost them both for cancer, both due to cancer, and then my father suddenly. So I really, this home, the idea of home and away from home, is really something very close to me. So when I was writing Miss Man as well, those themes, like not being around your family, not getting that love, not getting that acceptance of your dream, of your identity, of who you are, really mattered to me. Because I remember I really knew 2 things. I think this was a quote from the film Gandhi, which said that hunger is the worst form of violence. And I think this is one line which it resonated with me as well. That away from home and you have nothing to live on, nothing to feed on, and how will you survive? The survival, and also that really the loneliness, the idea of loneliness. That when you are away from home, this idea of loneliness, how it really grasps you from all the corners, from all the sides. This really took toll on me. So I think those themes really shows in my work as well, because of this big tragedy. And I think with my protagonist also, for Manod, which is played by Argo, he also goes through a similar thing. He has also lost his mother, if you see, in this case. And his mother believed in him, because we see him really dressing up in that sari, and he's reminiscing of his days with his mother, and his mother really gave him that one last hug. When his mother kissed him on the cheek and said that just go and enjoy yourself in the school function. And I feel that for my for my father, because I wish that when I was going away from the Kolkata airport, I touched his feet one last time to take his blessing, which I really regret even now that I didn't do that. So it's just something which I have always believed in, and those have come in, and it really made me what I am today. I think that 1 year and that particular loss. So home is a big thing for me, and I really know I think the quote that home is where the heart is really I have understood that more since then. So I think, but I have really gotten love from many people. My mother also stood by me. We both became close to each other as well during that time, and many of my friends. And I have managed to stand up more or less after that, from 5 years back. So I think it has been quite a journey, but I think thanks to cinema, thanks to my friends, it has helped me. And I think so the concept of home is very personal to me, and when I write that in a screenplay or show that in a film, this is how it comes in. So it's just a very personal response. Yeah.
Eisha, your film also talks about home and this young child who's looking for a parent figure, and then the parent figure also sort of having a kind of contentious, funny and sweet, and but also contentious kind of relationship with their home. So what was this exploration about? Why was what were you trying to sort of give to the audience in terms of this tussle of homes, why one person was kind of moving away and trying to push family away, and yet there was this the same protagonist had a young boy who was asking for a home and wanted him to be a parent. And tell us a little bit about that, to your conception of homes.
The film sort of starts with I just wanted. I'm still with
Tathagata.
Yes.
I know, me too. I want to give him a
story
virtual hug.
Like I didn't expect anybody to say that when we were talking about home. I thought it would just remain very intellectual, and then it just like boom. I'm really sorry to hear about your loss.
Thank you so much. It's okay. Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Arshad.
Quite a kick in the butt from the Gurwala. Yeah.
But I think this is what makes us the storyteller, because I was so moved by Arshad, and also hearing your journey when Arshad said that he became a filmmaker after 9/11, and that was so moving to hear. And I think probably this is what we make films for. It just to connect with people and to share, because many of us filmmakers are in a way maybe introverts, and film is the only way to communicate with people. So I think that's
the fact is that Eisha has made a really the ultimate search for home film with Desperately Seeking Helen, and that film has been an influential film in my life, a deeply influential film for which I am eternally grateful to Eisha, because it's a beautiful journey exploring her own terrible loss with the Air India bombing, her loss of her mother and her sister. And so I think, that's a really important film, which is actually part of the Canadian high school curriculum as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Looking forward to
I look
watching.
forward to
Thank you,
seeing
Arshad.
it. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah,
More part two.
oh, I think that, yes, you're right. Our own experience informs our art. Because, like Arshad was saying, thank you, Arshad, for this kind words. Earlier, he was saying that filmmaking is such a difficult process. It's a marathon, and it takes so much determination and perseverance to get a film made, that if there isn't any emotional investment, you're just not going to survive. I mean, there has to be some an emotional connection. I'm still thinking about Sebastiano's project that he's working on, which I think is such a incredibly interesting, I want to see it now, story that he's working on. So, that personal, emotional sort of connection to the stories that we tell, they're there sometimes in the background. I mean, what I made with Venus is a comedy, it's a comedy, so I have to be true to the genre. When people are expecting to see a comedy, you have to deliver the comedy. And so within the envelope of this genre, I'm exploring all of these multiple themes, and some of them came out by reviewers. Actually, there was a reviewer recently who said, your film has a lot to do with home. And I kind of thought, didn't really, I guess I at some level I knew that, but with my character, who is trans, the idea of home is embodied. She doesn't feel at home with her in her body and her identity, and that also affects how she presents herself in the world, how she feels in the world, and how she relates to people in the world. So there's a connection between, in my film, between being at home in her body and being at home in her world.
Yes.
And the film begins with her, the whole idea of Venus is that she's out of this world. She's not home on Earth. She comes from out of this world. So this idea of her, Venus is the goddess of love, but she's also, Venus is also a planet. And so she's this otherworldly, or that's how she feels, person who is trying to return home to herself. And the boy, the son, she discovers, becomes a way, I think, to anchor her into being more embodied in herself. And it becomes a journey of self-acceptance and self-love. And just hearing everybody talking about home, I think that the idea of home also matures as we mature as people. The idea of home is very physical as we're younger, mom, dad, home, family, dinners, that. And then as we mature and and as that idea becomes more elusive, because we realize that idyllic, our lives cannot depend on those solid kind of articulations of home. We need to find more subtle, deeper, and more internal, anchors that can only come from inside us, and it's only something we can cultivate in our relationships. And so it becomes more of a journey, finding home. And I like just what Arshad was saying, we as, queer people, as people of color, we try to find it through our relationships, through our communities, through our culture, through our other groups where we feel belonged. So the connection between being embodied, being belonged, these are all connected to home.
Right.
I just wanted to interject quickly by a couple of things. I just wanted to say that Eisha, is desperately seeking Helen. Helen, for me, is also such a queer figure. Like, she's this icon of excess that could not be contained within like everyday Bollywood narrative. And the fact that you had to trace down her archive. And when I saw the name for your film, what came to my mind was the story of Hottentot Venus, Sarah Bartman. She was of the two South African women who were sold as slaves in France and for their big buttocks and displayed. So there's this like long history of Venus. So I found it very interesting that, and your Venus, who's another kind of freak, but also creating her own life on her own terms.
It's interesting because when Desperately Seeking Helen came out, a lot of people, called it a queer film before I even knew what that idea was. And so I said, oh yeah, I guess. And so I just kind of fell into that role of producing queer cinema without really consciously knowing what it meant theoretically or, academically. So, but yeah.
You produced queer theory. That's my point. Every one of you produced theory, and we just write about it.
This is true. This is true. And that's also what a little bit about this conversation is about. It's the kind of effect that filmmakers have in creating repositories and imaginations of repositories of imagination. Because how do you imagine yourself as a queer protagonist or a queer person in the world is so much dependent, not just, so cinema doesn't just reflect what's reality, but it also helps shape reality in so many ways, and it's that relationship that is so interesting. Tushar's film is also about, it's the desire to create, the story revolves also around the desire to create a home, right? For another living being and to construct a home. So, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interject. There are all these questions about everyone wanting Eisha to see, everyone wanting to see Isha's film. But Isha's film is playing on at the festival, which is going to start in 2 days' time. So everyone should watch everyone's films on the festival, at the festival. There's so much more that we can talk about, but I'm just looking at the time. It's about 10:40 right now. Are there any other questions that, that people have, before we kind of, Debanuj has some wrap up.
I just wanted to say something.
Sure.
Which is that, films seem to have like this temporality in their commercial aspect and in their commercial, life. But they are, a lot of these people, I've seen almost everyone's films on here. So I know that these are kind of timeless films, and a lot of younger generations don't know about them or are unaware of them. And we're not all film academics. So, it's really important that, we also revisit films. So I would encourage festival programmers, for example, to revisit Eisha Marjara's film, Desperately Seeking Helen, which world premiered at the Locarno Film Festival. And I think that a lot of our works have that lasting value to a lot of people outside of academia as well. So I think efforts should be made to, have these kind of some kind of collection or something, so that people are aware of all the works that are out there and that are so important and that have made difference in so many people's lives.
No, I think that's a very, very good point, Arshad. And both you and me are film programmers. And that's also a reason why we included Sebastiano's film, was because there's so much right now about queer cinema that's, Call Me By Your Name has been such a big film in the Western world around queer cinema. So I kind of also wanted to go back a little to see what was the kind of cinema that was being produced before
Can I just
that.
say one more thing? Can I just say
Sure.
one more thing?
Sure.
I was, with my film, I was in Amsterdam and I had a flyer for my film screening at this festival. I was very excited for my premiere there. And I gave the flyer to this really beautiful man, and he looked at it and he said, "Oh, this is an LGBT film festival. I'm straight." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, we lived our lives watching straight films. Like, I cried watching Titanic. I didn't think I was not, I'm straight. So these people's death means nothing to me. Like, what the F is that, So I think that people have to be challenged that way as well.
Yes.
And, made to realize. And that's why I think no film is irrelevant or no film is lesser. That's why I think Call Me By Your Name cannot be denigrated by saying it's too heteronormative, because these love, as they say, love is love. It's a cliche, but it's important. And that's what's
Right.
allowing us to thrive.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was one of my favorite films. I loved the book and I loved the movie. I saw it twice. I spoke on 2 panels on it. I think there's great merit to, I don't know, finding the common. I wouldn't even call it normalizing, but kind of finding empathy, finding the commonality in lives and in existence, in different kinds of experiences of existence. And at the same time, I do believe that I love films that are about difference, and that celebrate difference. And for me, I think both those counterpoints are important to see and reflected in cinema as well.
I think what's very important and not to forget is that we need to uplift each other's voices, and we need to bring each other to the forefront, because corporate media and its agenda will not allow us to do that. So what is really important is, at the end of the day, these are people's livelihoods, and these people's films, they need acknowledgement. And not all A-list festivals pick everyone's films. They often don't actually even recognize some of the best films. So I think your festival is doing something very important by uplifting and highlighting voices like mine and Eisha's and Tathagata's and Onir's and all these other filmmakers, Tushar's. And so it's very important that we understand, first of all, our role in helping uplift each other, and also realizing we have a very big machine that we're fighting against to be seen and heard.
Absolutely.
And it's just gotten worse with COVID.
Yeah, that's true. But it's also COVID that gives us this platform and this impetus to connect across the world on on Zoom. Otherwise, this festival has also been incredibly different to program this time, and we've had access to so many more people and across the globe. And so COVID's an interesting time. I mean, just like everything has a flip coin side story, but I think COVID has also been incredibly
But
interesting.
there is a Zoom fatigue. I mean,
There
like, I
is,
don't know about you, but
absolutely.
I'm like in the middle of my film festival, and last thing I want to be is on another screen.
Yes. But again, we're creating archives for people who will not, and these conversations, I think, will last for a while, and it's not the immediate kind of fatigue that will there will be fatigue, but then there'll also be sparseness. There is so much imagery, there's so many stories, but there's also so little, Arshad. When you really look at the entire vast sum, I mean, compared to everything else that's out there, I mean, we desperately need more queer voices. We need more diverse voices. We need to celebrate all of the differences in the queer pantheon of cinema and voices. Asim, did you have any questions? He's been a silent kind of.
I've been listening to it all, so there's a lot to digest here.
Nice shawl, Asim.
It's so cold, man. It's just bloody Delhi. It's so cold inside. I'm sorry, that's not the topic of the subject. Thank you. You cried watching Titanic. I'm gonna talk to you about that separately. But thank you all.
I actually did not cry watching Titanic. I actually went to see Titanic only because it was made by a Canadian filmmaker. And I thought, oh my God, I must go and support it because it's the most expensive film ever made. He's put all his money in it. I went to see Titanic. After the end of the film, I was telling my friends, what a terrible film. I'm glad I gave money to support it and brought my friends. It was a Bollywood film for me.
I take it back and let's move on. Thank you all. This has been just very, very informative, and I'm so glad this dialogue and conversation should continue. And thank you, Maina, of course, for putting together the whole panel. So
thank you. Thank you all of you for lending time. Thanks, Sebastiano. Thanks, Onir. Thanks, Tathagata. Thanks, Debanuj, Arshad, Eisha, Tushar. Thank you. Stay connected.